Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Danica Copp. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sounds great. So my name is Danica Copp, and I'm a master's level clinical social worker. And what that means is that in addition to undergrad, I also went to grad school for social work. And then after grad school, you work for a number of years and are babysat, and then you go take your exam, and then you get licensed once your supervisor agrees to sign off. So I have over 25 years of experience, the majority of which has been with adolescents. I've always kind of enjoyed that population, I think because I hated being an adolescent. And I also think when I graduated, it felt like a population I could work with and not feel like I was kind of trying too hard, or, I was older than them. I had lived through that. So I felt like I had some experience to offer. Whereas, being working as parenting, doing anything, I wasn't a parent. I couldn't really show up and do that authentically. So teenagers became kind of my specialty, and every time I've tried to move away, I always end up sucked back in, which is great. I enjoy that population. And the past 11 years I have spent as a psychotherapist, primarily with adolescents kind of in their issues. And so through that experience, I have really seen the shift from kind of how like you and I were raised back for me, it was the 70s, 80s. I'm not sure how close to that you are, but we were
around there, 80s, 90s. Okay. Yeah.
So, we were forced to interact with other people. That was just part of our lives. Like you had to answer the house phone. You had to go knock on people's doors. Like you were forced to interact. Teenagers today in our tech-centric environment are not forced to interact in that way. And because of that, they don't gain those natural social skills. And so what I had begun to really see in my practice is the levels of social anxiety in adolescents just skyrocketing. And I don't know, yes, they meet criteria. They have social anxiety, but I really think it goes back to what Brené Brown has said in her podcast, the FFT, which is your effing first time you do something. It's terrifying. Yeah. And a lot of our teenagers, have a lot of FFTs they've never done. And so allowing them to have that experience, get out there, talk to people, use your phone for what phones are used for. And so in recognizing that and knowing that as a parent myself, the thought of sending your kid into the world is terrifying, especially when they are showing a level of social anxiety. So I developed my new coaching business to help parents launch their children successfully and kind of tackle some of those, social anxiety skills that I was seeing that I think are very fixable. They don't need medication. We just need to expose our kids to more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so interesting that you just lit off all the little things and all the thoughts in my head. And so I don't even know if I'm trying to listen instead of come up with the response. Right. And so
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And that is interesting because I'm currently reading a book called The Miracle Equation, which is written by Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning. Okay. And we're a group of friends of mine. We're dissecting the book and listening to it. And so today's chapter is about setting goals and about the motivation or lack thereof, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, I actually have my notes up so I can read it because otherwise I'll just butcher it. But procrastination, you can think of a bunch of different reasons that we procrastinate against stuff.
Sure.
And but there's really only one. And it's that you associate some kind of pain, fear, or discomfort with the activity that you're procrastinating on.
That's so true. Yep.
And so anxiety oftentimes gets labeled as anxiety instead of fear or discomfort or what's the pain, right? So
or just an unknown, like I've never done it, so it's just this big unknown.
Yeah. And I was physically reading a book. I know, shocking. It's like
you still do that.
I know, right? So another book club that I'm in, I'm deciding that book clubs are like the way to be. Like it's got the accountability, it's got the collaboration, it's the social aspect. It's like, it's so much fun. So we're starting a book club for the book Parenting from the Inside Out, which another one of my guests had said that I demonstrated one of the exercises in that book perfectly. And I was like, really? Because I haven't even read the books. I had it, I owned it, I purchased it, but I had not cracked it yet. And I was in the car reading, and I have never in my life written inside of a book because it's just so pretty. They're just so pretty. And I watched my dad growing up just drawing, writing underlines and all that. And I was like, I just could never bring myself to do it.
Sure.
So, but within the first like 2 paragraphs of this book, and it's the 10th year edition of the books, or the 10th edition, one or the other. And I think it was 10 year. And he wrote a little forward, and I highlighted, I'm using air quotes because I didn't have a highlighter. I didn't even have a pencil. And I was like dying inside to use a pen.
Yes.
But I couldn't not. Like, I know myself enough that I know that I'm not going to go back and reread it. And if I do, it might not land the same way. Right.
Sure.
But everything that I was highlighting, everything he was saying was basically the importance of personal development, specifically as a parent, but just in general. Also, and that's like what my podcast is, right? And why this stuff is so important.
Absolutely.
And I don't know where I was going with any of that, but I really do feel like this is one of the things, excuse me, that is so important in personal development for our kids, because when we as adults have goals and are chasing after things, we feel the feelings that we feel, and the anxiety and the nervousness and the whatevers. And your video froze, and that made my brain freeze, but I think you could still hear me.
Yes, I could.
But we experience these things, and we can push through them, and then we can spot it in our teens.
Absolutely. Well, and I think when you recognize that we don't grow when everything's just easy and peachy keen, right? We grow through difficulty. We grow through challenges, and through facing those and tackling them and moving through them. That's where our growth occurs. We want our kids to grow. We want our kids to stumble, to have a hard time with things. And we especially want that while they're under our roof.
More so than when they're not.
Small ways. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
This is so funny. I just love the way that like the universe works, and how everything just kind of lines up the way that it lines up, because one of the blog posts that I'm going to be writing in the next day or so is about letting your kids fail.
Yep.
And because there's literally, and I've mentioned this on another podcast, but there's literally muscles in our body that we need to strengthen through the process of walking and falling down and getting back up. And there's physical need of that, and there's
Yep.
emotional need of that. And
Absolutely.
part of my story that I've realized in the last couple of months is that my son would have so many meltdowns between 18 months and 3 years old that I got into the habit of, how do I avoid the meltdown?
Sure.
And
Sure.
that's another way of saying I was rescuing him from any kind of emotional anything that would create this
Right.
discomfort from, right?
Yes.
And
And you think of all the growth that's going on for him during that period, you know,
yeah,
developmentally, brain, you know, I mean, he was just
yeah. And you know, and he ended up being diagnosed with autism, high
okay.
functioning. But
Yes.
um
Extra sensitive.
what I noticed too is that as I got emotionally better, because I
Oh
was
yeah.
going through some major things starting at 14 months for him, and just
Yes.
massive depression, and he just got to experience all of that. Like,
Absolutely.
you just feel that. We can feel it
Absolutely.
from other people. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so as I got better, he's gotten better. And so, like, I don't even talk to his teachers or do IEPs or anything like that, because he doesn't need it.
Sure. That's
The
wonderful.
most he's complained now about sensory stuff is it's distracting for him during lunchtime, that there's so much noise. And so
Yes.
he's like, I don't have time to eat. And I'm using air quotes if you're not watching the video.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I don't have time to eat. And I asked him, and he has a really good like sense of time, because we've been like 5-minute timer, 5-minute timer his whole life.
Yes. Yes.
And I said, so how much time do you think that you're getting for lunch? And he said 8 minutes. And I was like, okay, so if I ask your teacher how much time you're getting, she's gonna say 8 minutes. And he said, I don't know for sure, but it feels like 8 minutes. And
Wow.
I asked the teacher, and she said they get 20 minutes for lunch.
Even 20 minutes for a lunch, that's not
That's
much.
really not much at all. And the reason that all of this came up is I had talked to a nutritionist about just making sure he's getting proper nutrition, because he's a
Right.
little on the smaller side, which could be genetics, and it could be that he's a picky eater.
Yep.
So I want to equip him with as much of my knowledge as I possibly can, and all the tools that I can. Like, that's what we want to do as
Sure.
parents, right? And
Absolutely.
so that's why this conversation came up. But, you know, I told him, okay, well, she says it's 20 minutes. And so we have two choices. We can eat faster, or
Yep.
we can have less recess. Because
Oh.
that was an option that the teacher gave me, is that they could hold him
Okay.
back until he's done.
Okay.
And let me tell you how much his food has been eaten.
Not taking away recess.
Not taking away. It's all about priorities, right? You know,
It
but my
is.
kid is a
You're absolutely
social
right.
butterfly, and it's interesting to me, and maybe you have insight on this with all of your experience, but he is a social butterfly with people his age.
Yep.
And when he comes, he'll probably be coming home through the door any minute. So he'll join us on the podcast to say hi. But he will not talk to you. He will meow at you.
Yep. Yep.
But he doesn't want to talk. There's a level of discomfort there, that a
Sure.
level of fear of, yeah. But once he feels comfortable, he's good to
Yep.
talk. So that's fascinated me since
Sure.
a couple days ago when I did a podcast. And then what happened again. And I was like, this is a pattern. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
There's some kind of rule that he has
Right.
in mind. And I never taught him
Absolutely.
stranger danger,
Yep.
because I feel like that caused a lot of harm because
Sure.
nobody ever told us that strangers are okay now.
Ah, okay.
Like, as you grow up, it's like, and you're trying to build a business, and you know, in my business we'd call it talking to strangers, we'd call it warm chatting. And
yes, yes.
it's talking to the people is uncomfortable. And for me and for them, because they're like, why are you talking to me?
Right, right. Yes.
So
Yes, exactly.
I think I heard something along the lines of tricky adults ask for help or something like.
Okay.
I remember hearing somebody somewhere taught that, and I was like, that's it. Because if you think about it, adults don't ask children for help.
Correct.
So if they do, that's suspicious.
That's probably a problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's a good one.
Anyway, we got off on a little tangent.
Yes, no worries.
So anxiety in teens. What
yes.
do you do? So you have a coaching business where you
I do.
And you work with the teens, you work with the parents, you work with both?
I'm working with the parents.
Okay.
So I want to help the parents to kind of, I have a adolescent launching checklist of over 75 tasks that adolescents should be able to do when they're leaving the house. So things like being able to make their own doctor's appointments, being able to, go to the doctors and, answer the questions like, what's my date of birth? What insurance do I have? Do I have allergies? Do I have any medical conditions? Kind of those basic questions that most kids, I don't know.
Yeah.
When my daughter was a sophomore in high school, I started modeling for her, making that yearly physical appointment. So I would have her come over and I would put it on speakerphone and I would tell the person the answer. And my daughter's here, we're making her yearly physical. And so she could kind of listen to me. And then junior year, we kind of did it together. So I kind of, said, we're here, we're making the call. My daughter's here. I'm trying to kind of teach her how to do it. And so then, she asked the questions, I would kind of like, go ahead and answer. And then senior year, there he is. Mm-hmm. And then senior year, I had her do it. Cutie patootie.
Every day, like clockwork.
What? Nice.
You come home, you find me at my desk, you give me a hug and a kiss. There we go. So to clarify, you said to leave the house, and you mean at 18 years old, I'm an adult.
To launch to college, and I think even if they launch to they're living at home, still at 18, there's an expectation that they're an adult, right? And, that there are some things that, people like, you can't call and make appointments for your kids because they're adults. And so right. Like, I mean, I know as a therapist, like when a parent makes a call, like I got to hear from the person if they're over 18. Like it's that I'm not going to take a referral from a parent of an over 18 person. Right. Because how do I know they really want therapy? Like my time is valuable. So I don't want to meet with somebody who's the parents are making them when they're over 18. Like that doesn't work. So I think, and even, kids have cars, and so the car breaks down, like what do? The fact that the car mechanic or your doctor is not going to text you with lab results or with the estimate of your car, like they're going to call, and so you're going to need to pick up the call. Right. You're going to have your voicemail set up. My sister works for Boston University, major university, and as residents life, they don't text you, they call. Right. if you report a problem, you have to be prepared to have them call back, like, okay, we'll send out facilities to fix whatever it is. But kids don't have their voicemail set up, so they never get the message. So then facilities can't come because we can't make the appointment. Right. These are real life situations.
And the funny thing is that there are people who live in my households that are 3 months older than me who still don't like making phone calls.
Absolutely.
And so I make all the appointments, and I've never had a problem with phone calls.
That's great.
And in fact, I had the opposite problem, is getting me off the phone.
Sure.
Was a problem, especially for my parents when I was growing up, when we didn't have, two-way calls and
absolutely.
All
everybody had their own number, so it didn't matter how long you were on the phone because everybody could get, there wasn't a house number. We each have our own individual number. Yep.
Yeah, and it's okay. It doesn't cause friction in our relationship because it's something that I enjoy, and I kind of I like the organization part of it, and I like there's so much of it that I like, but I mean, if we were both the same, we would
Yes.
never get anything done. I mean,
Yes.
there are a lot of, do it online things, but it's
Not
not
everything.
everything. Yeah.
Nope. And, for kids to understand, like, I know when I left for college, and the credit card companies were all there giving out credit cards, like understanding how much that was going to impact me, even as
Mhm.
I'm getting married, because I rang up credit card debt and ruined my credit,
Yeah.
that kids need to understand that they need to, and parents need to have had a discussion with them and kind of maybe perhaps shared kind of some of the difficulties as parents that we've had at their age. Or, I mean, I was very upfront with my daughter, when I went to school, they were like, your school is your job. You don't have to have a job. You can have a credit card. Here's $3,000 credit limit. Well, here's the problem. If school's my job, how am I paying that back?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. So, I mean, I graduated in incredible debt, not from school debt. My school was pretty much covered. I was very, very fortunate that my parents paid for the majority of my undergrad. However, I graduated with massive credit card debt.
Yeah.
And that impacted me. My husband actually paid that debt off when we got married so we could buy a house.
Wow.
So, and I was 27. I never made enough to pay it off. So I wanted my daughter to know how much that impacted me, as a young adult, and the stress it caused me to know that, like, basically, again, I have an unusual name. If people called and asked for Danica, I knew they didn't know me. So I would say, I'm sorry, I don't, that person isn't here.
Right.
That if you were calling for me, you were asking for Danica because that's my name.
Right. Yeah.
So, when my daughter was leaving for college, I was very clear with her, like, we're going to help you get a credit card, but we're going to also monitor that. And we're going to help you to, I'm not going to pay it for you, but we're going to, potentially cut off other things to help you get that paid off. We may not pay for other things and you may have to go without because I'm not going to allow you to accumulate the debt I did.
Right. So it's still teaching, and that's still teaching responsibility, which is amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And again, allowing them to fail in small ways.
Yeah. And also, like that's, I feel like, the circus performer is popping into my head, right? They're doing the flips and the this and the that and the other thing, but there's a safety net underneath.
Yes.
But they don't have a wire that's holding them up there. They have a safety net that's catching them if they fall.
When they fall. Right.
And
yep.
Like, I'm glad this is recorded because I'm going to have to write that down.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah. I'm like coming up with the analogies lately. I came up with a communication analogy while I was talking to a client of mine, and it's so good. I'm like, expanding it, but it's not the point of this conversation, but
yep, but still helpful. Absolutely. Good.
Yeah. And it is difficult. I think today, maybe it's always been difficult. I don't know. I wasn't alive 100 years ago, so I can't say like how our parents felt. But I know that there's certain people in my family that have resentment towards their parents because of how tough and how strict they are or were to them. And so a lot of times, and then, this person took the opposite approach and went
too far the other way.
Went too far the other way of like, my parent was, you're going to be under my thumb. And so now I'm not going to ever tell you what to do.
Right. And neither of those are helpful.
And so what I kind of did as a parent was I thought about the things that I didn't like as a child, and I altered them, but I didn't do the complete opposite.
Exactly. So, yes.
One of my examples is, I used to get yelled at to go to bed.
Okay.
And I held on to that as like, that's a really big pain point for me, was not just yelled at, but like screamed at to go to bed. Ooh. And
not helpful for calming down to go to sleep.
and and my brothers would tease me about it because they were teasing him, but it was painful for me.
Sure.
And then I was telling that to my son's dad's dad.
Yep. I got it.
And he said, well, my question is, how come you just didn't go to bed?
Ugh.
And I'm like, well, yeah, there's that too. I mean, I was a willful child, but
Sure.
it's also, I mean, I see as an adult now my blame in that situation, or my fault in that situation. And there are other ways of handling it. And we've had another guest on here talking about, I think somewhere on my podcast, I feel like I've talked about, or maybe it's a coach that I've had communication with at some point. We've talked about the damage of screaming at a child, and that and screaming at children, yelling at children doesn't make them hate you. It makes them hate themselves.
Exactly.
Now, I hated both, but
right. Well, and the idea that we're the adults, that the parent is the adult. And I'm a firm believer. I mean, I worked in the foster care system. So, I mean, I've worked with parents who have gone to jail for child abuse. And I don't believe any parent wakes up and thinks, today's the day I'm going to be a crap parent to my kid. Like, nobody does that. Right. Like, we all wake up and we want the best for our kid. We're trying our best. That ultimately substance use, our own mental health, our own trauma, like that impacts us as parents. But ideally, we're able to kind of step back, and I'm the adult. This child is struggling. What are they communicating? Right. And so if you had trouble going to bed, like, what was going on at that time of day that was really hard for you to transition from your day to your night, and for somebody to kind of sit with you and say, wow, I'm noticing bedtime's really hard for you. Like, what's happening for you? Like, how can I be more helpful? How can I, what would it look like for you and an ideal bedtime? Like, and you might say, I don't ever want to go to bed. I want to be up all night. And then the parent would need to say, and that would be amazing, right? Like, if we could have a yes day, like, it would be awesome to never have to go to bed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not realistic. Like, so is it that it's hard for you to transition upstairs? Is it, hard for you because you need a little bit more time and you're not getting it? Is it hard for you because you need more attention and you're not? Like, that's for the parent to try to figure out with the child. That's not for the child to just figure out, because they're a child.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we forget that we're adults, and yelling, it doesn't solve anything, right? Like, we don't want to be yelled at. And I think, that we really have to think of our children as learning beings. And we have to kind of mold them. And we do that through love and patience and gentle guidance, and understanding that all children communicate in different ways. We have kids, like your child on the spectrum, who their communication is not going to look like a neurotypical kid who's not on the spectrum, right? Who can maybe be more communicative. Your child, you really have to be a detective on the behaviors and kind of like, okay, like, clearly he's uncomfortable. Let me ask those questions if he's able to give me that feedback, or let me change the environment, because clearly this environment is too much.
Yeah. And we started, because I had that in my past too. I may not have done it as directly as the way that you just beautifully stated it. So if anybody's having bedtime issues with their kids, like, rewind that and write that down, because that was just beautifully stated. But when he was 3, I told him, I said, I don't want to yell at you to go to bed. And it's very frustrating to me that when I tell you to go to bed and you don't.
Yes.
So I just need you to listen and go to bed.
Yep.
And that worked for years, right?
Perfect. Yep.
And later on, I didn't really notice so much, because it wasn't a nuisance to me as much. I think it was a little bit of a nuisance to my boyfriend. And he said, that, like, when it's bedtime, he's hungry, and then he needs a glass of water, and then he wants an extra hug, and then he's like, we need to, like, have more structure when it comes to bedtime, where we say, okay, at 8:30, we're going to get your water. And do you need a snack? And
Yes.
let's read you
Yep.
a story. And so
Snuggle.
that's what we've started doing, where we're starting at 8, no more electronics. So he gets an
Yep.
hour before bed
Yep.
with no
Perfect.
electronics. We'll sit in every other day it's bath, and then we'll
Yep.
do reading either for half an hour, an hour, or however much time. And
Sure.
sometimes he'll sit here and at the desk next to me, and he'll just sit and draw.
Yep.
And for a little while, so there's flexibility there. So he's not being dictated
Absolutely.
to.
Yep. And he gets to choose. Yep.
He gets to choose what he wants to do. And most of the time he likes sitting down and reading with me. And I'm trying to feed my body and my soul and have enough of energy. Like
Right.
I'm like done at a
Of
certain,
course.
and I'm
Of
trying,
course.
like energetically at 9 o'clock, I'm done. I'm like, I might be able to walk you to bed if we read on my
Yep.
bed, but
Right.
otherwise I'm just done because I get up early. I'm the
Right.
early bird.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And having that routine also reminds me to give him his vitamins at night.
Yep.
And if we feel like we're going to need it, he might get some melatonin. And
Yep.
just
Yep.
we
Yeah.
but when
that check-in.
that check-in, and the more routine we have,
Yes.
the less he needs the distractions of, like, I need a podcast to listen to when I go to sleep, and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, when you think about even like all of us, like when the pandemic occurred, and so now we're all locked down at home and there's no structure, like how much we all were like, okay, like this is fun for a week or two, like woohoo, we're all home and then it was kind of like, oh, like this, we're not, like the kids aren't going back to school, and like I'm not going back to work, and like now I gotta like figure out like that's new routine. And I know there was a lot of kids who never returned to school, who then with the new coming year, it was like, how do I do that? And it's been a disruption. All of us as humans, we thrive on routine and some structure. It doesn't have to be tight, but just that there is a routine to our lives. We need that.
And it's funny for me because I immediately went into routine. I needed the structure because
Yes.
I've been in those situations where I have had nothing to do or very little to do for a really long time, and it leads to depression, and it leads to everything that's not good. Like
it does.
So I was waking up and I was going for a walk every morning, and and then after that I jumped on Zoom with my friend and we would chit chat for a while, and then we would practice coaching stuff, and like it was she and I, like, thank God we connected immediately, and we were like, let's hammer out this coaching program that we, both paid for and haven't completed, right?
Yes. Good for you. Good for you.
Accountability partners, and so I've really enjoyed the lockdown and the all of the, like, the working from home. I'm thriving in it, and I have to remind myself that not everybody is like me.
Yes, people not like you have kept people like me in business with therapy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know why this hit me when you said foster parents, and nobody wakes up and says, I want to be a bad parent today, but I don't know why foster system really never clicked in that way with what awful parents they are, or like what's the neglect or whatever that's led to, like, it's got to be really bad for children in the to be taken away from a parent.
Oh, 100%. That's a whole nother podcast.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that just hit my heart when you said that, and I felt like I needed to say it, but yeah.
Yes, because they're usually taken at the end of their school day, because it's less disruption to take a child from school than it is to take them from their house. So they show up in foster care with absolutely nothing but their book bag.
Oh,
And imagine, I always say this when I would do foster parent trainings. Imagine going to work today and I show up at the end of your work day and you're coming out of work with your purse and your lunch bag. And I say, you're not going home tonight. I got a great home that you're going to go to instead. And it's going to be wonderful. And I take you to just some random hotel and you have nothing.
That right there.
That is what we do.
Dramatic.
That is what we do. Yep. But that is what we do to foster kids. And we do that because that way it's less disruptive with the parent. Like it is like to remove them right after the school day. You don't have that legal, it can be, to rip a kid from their parent is horrendous. And then you might have police involvement because who knows, but
Right.
That is what we do to foster children when we remove them is we take them at the end of the school day and they have nothing. They don't have their toothbrush. They don't have their favorite hairbrush. They don't have their makeup. They don't have their favorite stuffed animal. I mean, maybe we can get that. They don't have their favorite pillow. Like, I mean, I think of when I travel, I take my pillows with me.
Yeah.
They don't have any of that.
Mm.
They don't have their own clothing. Like they literally have their backpack and the clothes that they wore to school today. That's all they have. That's theirs. So it is very traumatic.
My stepdad was in Child Protective Services for I don't know how long. Now he's with the state instead of the county.
Yes.
So he's still doing it, and I just
it's a tough job.
He looks like Santa on a good day, on his own. And so they would always ask him to do Santa, and he did it once, and he said, I will never do that again because too many children asked for dad to come home or mom to come home from jail for Christmas.
You never stop loving your parent no matter what they've done to you. Absolutely. They're your mom and your dad.
Yeah. And yet some people cast their parents as the villain in their life when their parent is actually really good.
Well, I think, again, parents are easily targeted, right? They're easy to blame, that kind of, well, if they had just done this better. And again, parents do the best they can with what they have. They do. I tell that to, every client I meet with who has a parent issue, like your parents did not set out to make your life miserable. And like, where can you find the good in what they did, And I think too, a lot of this is the multi-generational traumas that, that we endure, that if you look at your parents, so I look at my own mother, and my mother was the oldest of 7. And she was literally born 9 months after my grandparents got married. And then by the time she was 3, there were 4 girls because 11 months after my mother, twins were born. And then 14 months later, another girl was born, and that daughter had birth injuries. And so she was like strapped to a board, and it like was very sickly. They didn't think she was going to survive. They didn't think one of the twins was going to survive either. So my mom was the first healthiest child. And at 3, she's in a caretaker role because she's been booted out. I mean, she was 11 months old when her sisters were born, and one of those twins wasn't going to survive. So my mother did not get to be a baby. And my mother became a nurse. My mother was overweight because food was a big source of her, she would cook for the family and eat. And that was, and then she became a nurse because that's a caretaking role, right? Yeah. And my mother did not get to have feelings, that she just kind of had to shut up and just, be the good girl because she's the oldest and she's in charge. And for her 7th birthday, she got a brother. Like, like welcome to her life. And my grandparents were hardworking people. They provided a good living. My mother, grew up middle class. She was able to go to nursing school. She was able to marry well. My father had a bachelor's degree, and my parents were very upper middle class. And I look at how my mother raised me. And while she didn't always get me, I was a very emotive child. I would have horrific temper tantrums, and she had no idea what to do with that because that wasn't tolerated in her family. But she allowed me to have temper tantrums, right? She never shut me down. She didn't know what to do with me when I would have them, but she sat with me and she was like, I'm here. I love you. Like she allowed me to have feelings. So I think of like, was she a perfect parent? No, of course not. But when I look at how much she did better than what she got, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And when I think back to like my grandparents and how they were raised, like, again, each generation gets a little bit better, and I think you had said it where like, what can I take that I didn't like and how can I be different with that? There's probably a lot that was good, right? And I want to continue that.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom had 4 kids, and she was a full-time teacher and an 80s mom. And so I really feel like the 80s moms had to do it all, and so she was doing the cooking and the cleaning, and and I found a way to connect with her because I needed the connection. And God bless her little heart for letting me just follow her around the house and just talk her ear off. And and I feel so grateful that, because that I could imagine that would be annoying after a while too. But I was so grateful she never shut me down. She never told me not to. She never said leave me alone. I was never a passion for her.
Right.
And like, she was my talking therapy. Like, when I was 16 and I moved out and to live at my dad's house instead, I didn't have the comfort level to talk to my dad that way. I didn't have the comfort level to talk to my stepmom that way. I left all my friends at my last school.
Oh, geez.
I wasn't allowed to have a phone in my room. And I went from having, support to isolation. And that was the first time in my life where I felt real depression.
Sure.
And it was, I just remember, like, I looked back at all the points in my life where I felt depressed. And it was when I didn't feel like I had people I could talk to, or someone I could trust.
Listen.
Listen.
Yeah,
for sure. And and so that has become a priority in my life, because I connect to people through conversation. I bet you didn't know that. Like,
would have been able to tell
I bet you couldn't get that.
Nope.
But thank God for, I am so happy that I was born in the time that I was born in, because like, like, no, technology was better without it. I was like, Psh, I love technology.
Absolutely.
Don't slam it. It's nothing. And I have to be careful and remember that there are real people, which is kind of full circle back to what we started out talking about.
Yes.
I would imagine that even COVID has made it a lot worse for these teens that would connect with friends at school, and now they have to be on Zoom, and now for a year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard too, that social media is such a part of their lives. And, I have another coach, Rio, who talks about how, teenagers compare, anybody compares their backstage to somebody's main stage, right? Rio Scott said that. And so, what they're putting on social media is the best part of it. That's the production. They're not seeing how everybody's scrambling behind the scenes and, the costumes malfunctioning. And, that's what's happening to us off social media. And that's what we're comparing. And that's so true. And, I think back to my own high school days. How often were you like walking off the field with somebody and you were like, hey, you want to grab a pizza? Yeah, let's grab pizza. And we didn't then think, well, who else can we invite? Like, we would just go grab our pizza. And that wasn't posted on social media. So nobody felt left out because they didn't come have pizza with us that night. Whereas now that same thing happens. It's not that you're excluding anybody. It's just kind of in the moment, here's what we're going to go do. But now we've posted the picture. And so now the people that weren't part of that afternoon activity or whatever it was, working in that group or whatever, feel left out. Thank God I didn't grow up in social media, because I can't even imagine the impact that has. Yeah. But it has a huge impact on kids. Yeah.
I like these.
And,
go ahead.
Yeah. The idea of like, the more friends I have or the more likes I have, and like, but they're not even friends. Right. Like, you barely know these people.
Right.
Like that in the scheme of things means nothing.
Yeah. I probably have 1,000 to 2,000 friends. I haven't looked. I don't really, it's not a status thing for me at all.
Exactly.
And like, most of them are people that I know, but I don't talk to a majority of them on even a yearly basis. Like I go in and out of my phases of wishing people happy birthday.
Yeah.
But even that, and I go out of it because it's like, I've experienced my own birthday and it's just like thousands of people posting happy birthday, and so many people just do it because Facebook tells them to do it, that it's not personal. And so it's like, if I don't have time to reach out and give you the personal happy birthday, I'm not going to.
Absolutely.
You're getting 1,000 other happy birthdays from other people.
Yes. Yep.
But that illusion of that perfection, we even talked about it before I hit record, because I straightened up the back of my background, because I have little OCD things, like there's a chair that's sitting next to me on my left, and it drives me insane if it's on camera. I don't know why. It doesn't even look ugly. It's a nice chair, but it drives me nuts. It's not, it's a distraction to me. And so I want the view. And if my background looks messy, there's still that inner voice that says the background's messy, you better clean, they're looking at your background, you better clean it up next time, like they're judging you. Like there's still that little inner talk where it's like, I want to be present with you and not thinking about people I'm not ever going to talk to.
Yes. Absolutely. So, they don't get a vote.
Coping mechanism for now until I get rid of the voice. I don't know. Hopefully I never get rid of the voice, because you don't want to see the background when the voice is gone. Sometimes there's a little goodness. Now I'm going to tell one sidetrack story, because it just happened yesterday. My whole family went to a Dodger game. Ooh. And it was they almost had a perfect game. So one hit away from a perfect game. I know it was like so exciting and so disappointing, but it was more exciting. And the pitcher got 3,000 strikes this season during that game. Anyway, most thrilling game we've ever had. Yeah, we wanted to spend some quality time with my dad doing something that he really, really loved. And so we went to this restaurant called Lucky Burgers. It's down in LA somewhere. I've been there a million times in my life and I have no idea where it is. I think it might be Pasadena, but I'm not sure.
All right.
Anyway, also not important. So we were at the burger place, and it's an outdoor dining, and I'm telling a story about my son and how he deals with his emotions differently around different people.
Yes.
And so with my boyfriend, he's got that stiff upper lip and he could need 4 stitches, and he'd be like, look, Larry, I'm bleeding, it's awesome, right? And but if Larry's not around and we get a scratch, it's the end of the world, right? And and I talk very dramatically and loud.
Sure.
Especially when I'm enjoying myself and I'm into it, right? And so I was dramatizing my son, and all 3 of my brothers at the same time shushed me.
Oh God.
And I went back to that little girl that was always shushed by her brothers, and don't cry, and you're too emotional, like all of that. And I sat there. It was maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I sat there and I was like, oh, I'll show you how good I can shush. And and I recognized what I was doing. And I said, I'm not gonna let anything ruin this day, this memory for me.
Good for you.
And I'm a 39-year-old badass woman.
Yep.
That can say whatever I want, whenever I want. And if you don't like it, too bad for you.
Absolutely. Good for you.
And
you're not the boss of me.
You're not the boss of me. Exactly. And my favorite phrase is, I do what I want.
There you go.
I'm a Leo. I do what I want.
Yep.
And then I reminded myself that my brothers grew up in the same house where we were worried about what other people thought of us.
Yes.
And I've outgrown that and they haven't.
Yes.
Right. And so I was just like, oh, evidence of my growth.
Yes.
On the back.
Absolutely. See how hard I worked? It shows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I don't think any of them know, and none of them listen to the podcast, so they'll never know that I,
okay,
it hurt my feelings, and I'm fine. I might tell my older brother because we're kind of cut from the same cloth.
Okay.
But anyway, so back on topic. Advice for moms. What advice do you want to give?
So I think it's critically important to kind of recognize and identify for your child when they're having feelings or emotions that we tend as parents to kind of like just like go away. We've kind of talked about that. And especially when we're telling our child no. So I always will tell the story to parents that if you go to your boss today and you ask for a raise and your boss says no, you don't walk away saying, woohoo, best boss ever. I'm so lucky to work here. Nobody's going to do that. You're going to walk away and you're not going to say it to your boss, but you're going to call your partner, your sibling, your best friend and be like, you won't believe what my boss said. They're not giving me a raise. They suck. You're probably going to have other words that you're going to use. You're not going to be like, woohoo, good boss, good boss. But we tell our children no, and we expect them to walk away going, yay, mom and dad said no, woohoo. We don't allow them to be upset. We don't allow them to have feelings around hearing no. That's not okay. Right. That's denying them the ability to feel yucky at times or to manage those emotions when you hear no. So allowing your child to, have a why, I said no. What, why? I always would just offer like, no, we can't do that because of blah, blah, blah. Mommy's too tired. We're busy, we have a busy weekend coming up. So to go out on Friday night's not a good idea. Whatever the reason, I always gave a reason why. Now, at times, it's okay to say the reason why is it's been a crazy week and I'm exhausted and I don't have the bandwidth to do that. That's an okay answer. My daughter would then say, is that a hard no, mom? Or if I can find a ride? Because we would always like, we'll drive one way, so I would need to kind of have the bandwidth to participate in the carpool. And so using, is it a hard no or not? It's like, well, it's not a hard no for you. It's a hard no for me. So then if she could problem solve, like, well, hey, if I go spend the night at, such and such's house and their parents drive, can I go? Yeah, I'm okay with that. So that allowed her to be able to learn how to problem solve, right? To learn how to kind of take a problem and kind of let me sort out a new answer and be creative about that. It also, if I said it's a hard no, it taught her that, okay, I need to just leave that. Like mom's tired and I just need to trust that this just isn't a good night. But again, I didn't expect her to walk away going, yes, good job, mom. And sometimes I would say, like asked and answered. That was, I had a couple of phrases. I like mantras where kind of, it's like the same things that I can just fall back on, but that I can say neutrally and kindly. So, sweetie, you've asked and answered that. You've asked that question. I've answered it. It's asked and answered. You need to move on. And that would kind of, if she keeps pushing it, she could lose something. And, you would usually take an electronic, are you prepared to give up your electronic? And I would always phrase it that way. It wasn't like, now you've lost it. Like, it was asked and answered. And so now, if you need to continue to go on about this, perhaps you need to go get your phone and turn that in for the night. That's your choice. Like your behavior, your choices. I also would regularly give her a take two. So if she would come down to the kitchen, we have a double, colonial house. So she would come down the stairs into the kitchen and she would come in her sassy kind of, I want to, or, whatever kind of sassiness, that girls will come in with. I would turn around and be like, whoa, time out. And then I would be like, you need to take two on that. Why don't you go back to the entry and try that again? Because I want to say yes as your mom, but that's not going to get you to the yes. And so she would literally walk back out to the entryway and kind of like reset herself and come back in. Yeah. And I loved that I did that, and I was not the perfect parent. Like I have a lot of parenting fails, but these are some parenting wins that I figured out along the way. Yeah. But I love that gave her the opportunity to not just me go into like, lose the tone, young lady, like, right. Whoa. Like I want to teach her how to get to her yes. And I want to remind her that this interaction it's nothing to do with me. Like whatever happened to her upstairs or earlier today, it has nothing to do with me. So let me kind of give her a take two and remind her, like, I'm your mom. I want the best for you. I want to say yes to you, but I'm not going to say yes with that.
Right.
So go try it again.
Yeah.
And she learned quickly, like, sometimes she would come down and she would even walk in and she'd be like, hold on. Okay, mom, would it be okay? Or mom, I need, or can I please have? And yes, thank you. That's a great way to ask. Like, I appreciate that, And again, I'm trying to teach her to be an adult and to behave appropriately in the world. That's my goal.
Right. And I have a similar interaction with my son when he gives me an attitude. And there's something really good about when you don't get triggered by their emotion, by their attitude, by whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
Then you can approach it with, why are you talking to me that way?
Right.
And that happened. And he said, and he stopped and he said, I'm sorry, mom, I'm upset about something else. And so now what happened? He's apologized by himself. He's realized his own mistake. And I learned a new detail. Something happened that upset him. Would you like?
Let's talk about that. I want to hear about it. Yeah.
Would you like to talk about it? Not right now. Okay.
I'm here when you need me. Yep.
Put that in the schedule. And in that instance, I actually knew what was wrong.
Sure.
I didn't
engage.
know it affected him, the thing that made him mad, to the extent that it did.
Yes.
And so we did get to talk about it later. And and so I love that approach. I love the take two, just because that's a lot like my personality. Like, okay, you over,
Yep, exactly. And it brings that humor. Like, I love using humor, like, because we want to, the goal is to de-escalate situations, not to escalate them more. Right. So kind of when I'm like, whoa, time out, we got to take a two on that. Then she's kind of like, oh my God, mom, you're such a goof. Like, yep, I am. But I want to change the tone of this. And this, I don't like where we're going. And I want you to know that you can get the yes, just ask the right way.
And I'm curious if she wasn't receptive to the humor.
Yes.
You have changed your approach.
I would have. Yes. And I only had one. And my mom always said, like, you learn how to parent one and then you have your second one and it's the complete opposite. I only had one. But I absolutely, yes, I would have, I got to these answers through trial and error with her.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we had days literally in our old townhouse where I was on one end of the door trying to hold it closed and she was on the other end of the door trying to open it because she needed a timeout. And she was going to take a timeout, and so we're struggling over the doorknob. And I recognized she wasn't a kid who could be alone. The isolation of that, like, she melted down, that I wouldn't be with her, felt like I didn't love her. So I had to learn that wasn't a parenting strategy that worked with her.
Right.
So then I had to learn I couldn't engage with her because that would piss me off and that would escalate me. But I could go into her room and kind of stand in the corner and kind of say to her without, kind of just I literally would do it with my eyes closed. I just couldn't even look at her because I didn't want to engage. Like, I'm here and I love you. And I just need you to calm down. When you sit calmly in your bed, I will come hug you. I love you. I'm your mom and I love you. Like, I would just very calmly, and she would be screaming and throwing her temper tantrum. And, I'm here with you. I love you. When you're calm on your bed, I will come sit with you. I will give you a hug as soon as you can calm down and sit on your bed.
Yeah.
And as I learned that, she would calm down much quicker because I didn't isolate her. Yeah. So yes, I'm not a perfect parent by any means.
None of us are perfect. And that, like, I love the advice that I get from moms. I was going to say earlier, I love these conversations because my son's 9. Sure. So like, he's not a teenager yet. So I'm getting like extra knowledge about like what to do when I run into these situations. Yeah. And son doesn't, when he's really mad, he does not like it when I'm being funny.
Of course not. Right. That feels like you're mocking him, I'm sure.
Right. And what I'm essentially trying to do is rescue him from his emotions. And and there's a little bit of discomfort with his
Sure.
discomfort. And so that's awareness for me, that
absolutely good for you.
And I need to learn to sit, and that takes practice. I'm learning to sit with my own emotions as we speak.
Yes.
That's my current path, is like, just sit with the emotion. And if you're going to cry, because I was told, don't cry, stop crying.
Right.
Too emotional. So I tried for so hard to stop being emotional, and gosh darn it, I couldn't stop it.
Right. You can't not be who you are. Right.
And so it's just, and I am, I guess humor is a defense mechanism, but it's also, humor is amazing to me. Like, I would love to laugh more than anything else.
Right. So, well, and I think it can really kind of shift a mood, which is how it worked in our house.
Right. And he's good enough that he'll tell me, I'm not in the mood, Mom. Okay.
Yep.
And I'm learning to,
respect that. Yep, exactly. To recognize his feelings and emotions. That's what's most important.
So what is your book recommendation?
So I have two. It was really hard for me to pick, so I just decided to have two. So I have a daughter. So for me, Untangled, Guiding Teen Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood, which is by Lisa D'Amour, who's a PhD, was very pivotal for me as a parent and me as a clinician, in terms of understanding kind of how, especially girls, kind of push off. She uses a swimming pool analogy. So girls will kind of push off from their parent, like you're pushing off from the side of a pool to take a lap. And it is painful, but know that they're going to come back and grab on when they finish their lap, right? And so you need to still be there, and you need to kind of allow them to push off against you and stay strong for them so that they can come back and grab and have that safety. So that book was it's a phenomenal book. She has another book she's written that's also excellent. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but she's a phenomenal about teenagers. And the second one that I love is Brainstorm, The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain, which is by Dr. Daniel Siegel. And he's just he's an MD, and he just is phenomenal with his brain research. And so we've obviously learned so much in the past 10 to 15 years about brains that we never knew, and the development of brains. And we've learned how teenagers are going through rapid brain growth, like, infant to birth to 3 is occurring from like 14 to like 25. And so really understanding like the risk taking that teenagers do, and that the fact that their frontal lobes are not fully developed, they can't really predict the future and think through consequences of behaviors, and the excitement they have about life is great. Like, we want to harness that because they just are very creative about new ideas. And we look at teenagers and we're like, I think they know everything. Well, their brains are just so wide open, and they're just so creative and problem solving because the frontal lobe's not developed. They can't kind of, oh, well, that wouldn't work because blah, blah, blah. So like, we want to allow them to kind of explore. The problem is we want them to do it safely. And sometimes their exploring involves risk, and they can't think through the consequences. And I think frequently I have 2 nephews who I adore, the youngest of whom is a crazy clown. He's a great kid. But I remember one Christmas visiting and him saying, oh yeah, we took a desk chair and we tied a rope to the back of the truck, and we were, going down the country road, and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, Justin, your frontal lobe's not fully developed. Like, and he was like, I wore a helmet. And I'm like, I mean, thanks, but like, that is adolescence. Like, the risk taking.
Yeah, I love Dr. Daniel Siegel. He's the author of the Parenting from the Inside Out, which is the second book that
fantastic
that I'm reading. So I mean,
I will look that one up. Yes,
brackets, and it's so good. And I haven't even gotten out of the intro. Like, I couldn't underline because I was in a car, so I had to brackets around the sentence.
Yes.
But I'm like, how do you appropriately quote on Instagram? Because I want to use these as because they're all about why personal development is so important to parenting.
Sure.
And understanding your own past and how that's so important to you as a parent. And I'm like,
Yes.
well, it's like, that's what I'm about. Like, that's the message. And I want to quote them properly, but you know,
sure.
How do you do that? I'll have to Google that. Because yeah, not for legal reasons, but I just want him to be able to, you know,
absolutely
get the credit for the brilliance that is him, because the no drama discipline, I have listened to that more than once, and I'm not a reader of books. Like I'm a one and done kind of person, but that book, No Drama Discipline, have mentioned at least a dozen times on the podcast, that it changed everything for me, because I employed connect first before anything else.
Yes. And that is important.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the next step is discipline. And we don't even really have to get to the discipline. We get to the learning part. Like we get to the, which is discipline, right?
It is. Well, life is, you know, consequences and rewards, right? And the same with our children. And so approaching that, you know, the discipline is about consequences and rewards for behaviors and choices. And yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast. And I think I keep forgetting to ask my guests to tell my listeners where they can find you. So where can my listeners find you?
So you can get my free adolescent launching checklist at confidentlylaunchyourteen.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Danica Copp MSW, and Instagram, Danica Copp MSW. And I have a YouTube channel, and I know all the links will be in the show description, but yes, or you could email me at danica@coppcoaching.com. I'm out there.
You're there.
Yes.
I'm interested in the checklist, and what I'm really interested in, is writing a check on the check.
Yes, I believe it is. You know, I'll have to double check.
Yeah. Because that was one thing that, I mean, I'm smart, so I figured it out. And the funny thing is that I believe that my IQ wise, my boyfriend's probably significantly smarter than I am.
Okay. Yep.
And he never thought to look at the, like, on a check, it gives a example of how to write it. Right. And so I looked at that and I practiced a couple of times.
Good for you. Yes.
And then I was like, okay, I got this. And he said, I'm 38 years old and I've never done that. I'm like,
wow.
I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
Because he still doesn't like to write checks.
Oh, geez. All right.
I mean, it by the time Xander's out in the world, I don't think that checks will really be a thing anymore.
Yeah, they're not much of a thing now. So yeah.
Most companies don't take them, but
right.
That's where I find my router number and my account number.
This is true. Yes, they are good for that, for sure.
Anyway, well, again, thank you for being on the podcast and pouring into the guests and into me as well. And until next time, we'll have another episode on next week of Imperfect Momming. So we'll talk to you then.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.